Hello, I'm Bransby. Today I'm going to show you what it's like to record, arrange and mix a song using only open source software. Specifically, I'm using Ubuntu Studio 20.04 and Ardour 6.9. I'll also be showing you the Dragonfly Reverbs, Calf suite of plugins, Geonkick, Drumgizmo and the Surge soft synth. My usual disclaimer, I am not a professional, I'm not an expert, I'm not an authority, I am an enthusiastic amateur. I want to show you what's possible and how I use these tools creatively. If you are interested in open source software for music creation and you haven't already come across him, then I would highly recommend checking out Unfa's channel here on YouTube. I will stick a link below. Now, he has an enormous brain and a great many very useful videos, but his focus is MIDI and electronic music, and while there will be a little bit of that in this video, my focus is more acoustic recording and mixing. The song I'll be showing you today is one of my own. It's called Living for the Short Term and it's available on Bandcamp right now and will be released to all major streaming platforms from the 20th of December 2021. Links to all that down below. It began life as a very simple melody line that I wrote on my acoustic guitar, and I've built up the song entirely within Ardour. I'm not going to talk too much about the writing process today because I've done a whole series of videos about that. What I'm showing you is a finished product and how I got there. I'll be taking you through all my hardware as well today, outboard gear, audio interface, mics that I use, guitars, amps, all that kind of thing. I mastered this song in Ardour too, in a separate project, but I've done a video about that which you can check out on my channel. But in the meantime, let's get stuck in. Right, this is Ardour and this is Living for the Short Term. This is the whole project. As it was completed, I exported this and mastered the exported WAV file. So this is the finished article pre-mastering. So let's talk through Ardour. I'll give you a very brief overview of what we're looking at here. So this is the edit arrange window, which I spend most of my time in, to be fair. And these are all the tracks. Now for me, this is quite a complicated project. I appreciate it's all relative and other people might think this is dead simple, but in terms of the number of tracks I'm using, the number of channels and everything that I've got set up here, for me it's quite a complicated one. And I did find that towards the end of this it was taking a bit of a toll on my PC. I haven't got a particularly high spec machine and it was starting to struggle, but I'm going to talk about that more later because there are things I could have done, and in retrospect what I've learned from this is there are things I can do in future to ease the load on the PC and make things a bit easier. But let's talk through what we've got here. This is the arrange window. Let's also show you the mix window. So this is just a very bog standard mixer. I've done no customization of Ardour. I'm sure you can do all sorts of things. I don't bother, I just work with it as it comes out. I think this is probably not a bad moment to point out that I am not a massive computer geek, right? I am not a programmer. I'm not writing macros or stuff, which you can do, particularly in the open source environment like this. You can do all sorts of things and write scripts to make things easy for yourself. I'm a musician, I'm not a programmer, I don't know Python, I don't know C++ and all that crap, I don't know it, and I'm not interested in learning it, to be honest. My priority is writing music and recording music, and that's what I quite like about this. Yes, it's all open source and nerdy Linux stuff, but it works, and I don't have to learn a massive amount about open source software in Linux and stuff to make this work. For me, it works out of the box, essentially. Not that there is a box, of course, you download it. The mixer window. Let's talk through all the tracks I've got here, the range of things we're dealing with. This track here that you'll see is VO. That is purely for the purpose of this video, and it's the way I've got things set up to go into OBS, which is recording all of this. Ignore that, it's not part of the song. This track here, the first track I started with, is a MIDI track, and you can see that because it's got this little MIDI cable logo here, and there is a Surge soft synth on that. I'm going to go into that in a lot more detail first, but that's just to show you what a MIDI track looks like. These are all audio tracks, and you can see these are what the plugins look like when you've added them to a track. Let's find a bus for you. There's a bus. Look at that one there. So this is Voc FX. So this is an audio bus that I use to apply effects to a whole load of vocals all at the same time. And that ties into what I was mentioning earlier about load on your PC and a machine struggling to cope with things. That's one way you can sort of help out your computer, is to use more buses. And I should have used more buses, but I didn't. But that's one that I did use. That's a vocal effects one. More acoustic tracks there, more audio tracks. And here's a bit more MIDI. So this is another instance of Surge Synth with a it's another instance because it's got a different preset on it. It's the same instrument but a different preset and a different sound. Drumgizmo, I'm going to talk about that in a lot more detail later on. It's a drum synthesizer and it's fantastic. Geonkick, another sort of drum synthesizer. So I can't really think of the proper terms for these. Geonkick is literally a synthesizer. You create, you alter waveforms to create specific sounds. Drumgizmo is more of a sampler rather than a synthesizer. So it comes with some pre-sampled drum kits. You load them in and play the drums. There's another instance of Surge. I've got 3 instances of Surge in this project, and then there's a whole load more guitars and bass that I've recorded there, all audio tracks. And then there's the fanned out tracks of the Drumgizmo kit that I'm using. I'll go into a lot more detail about why that's there and what they exist for. And then there's a VCA here. Oh, there's another bus at the end there. That's a sidechain bus, which again I'll talk about later. And then there's a VCA. The VCAs, I can't remember what it stands for, but I use them to automate a whole group of tracks. Essentially, you can group tracks. This is what group tracks look like. So these Drumgizmo tracks are all grouped, and you can control things like record, control, mute, solo, all that sort of thing. But what I've discovered is you can't automate a group in a straightforward way, and that's why I use VCAs to do that. There's another group there. I grouped that lead guitar. You can control the fader by the group, but you can't control the automation, unless I'm wrong about this and you know a way to do it without using VCAs. But to be honest, the VCA works, so I just do it. So that's the mix window. Those are all the different types of tracks I'm using. We've got audio tracks, we've got MIDI tracks, we've got audio buses, and we've got a VCA in use within this project. So where did we start? We started, well, the song exists because of me twiddling about on my guitar and coming up with a very simple melody line on my acoustic guitar. It sounds like this. That's where I started. That was it. That was the idea. So don't come to me and say, oh, I can't think of any ideas for songs, because that's about as basic. That's barely an idea at all. It's just some twiddling about in a C major scale, and I've come up with a 5-minute banger from that one idea. So don't come to me telling me you haven't got ideas for songs. You don't need ideas. You just need to get something down. It's in C. So I started in C. I created a synth track using Surge Soft Synth. To create a new track in Ardour, Control Shift and N. I'm not brilliant with keyboard shortcuts, but that's what I know. Control Shift and N brings up the Add Track dialog. From here you can add audio tracks, MIDI tracks, buses, VCAs. So if you wanted to add a MIDI track, you open up this dialog and you go Add MIDI track. You can give it a name. You can select the instrument you're going to add to the track here, or you can do it later. You don't have to add it at this point. You can choose where you're going to position it, etc, etc. So that's what I did, and I'm going to close that because I don't want to create a new track at this point. I created a MIDI track and I added a Surge Soft Synth to it. Let's have a look at Surge. Let's come over here, and I'm going to make these tracks a bit bigger so you can see them. This is what I've got on the track. And let's have a look at the actual Surge Soft Synth. Now, this is a really powerful synth. It's got a number of oscillators here. I would love to sit here and pretend I understood what all this does, but I don't. It's got a number of oscillators. You can do various manipulation of those oscillators here. Then it's got, you know, LFOs, low frequency oscillators. You can adjust envelopes of things. You can add effects here. You can do all sorts of stuff. It's really, really powerful. But that also means that it's really, really complicated. To my simplistic, tiny little brain, it is anyway. It's very complicated. So I just use the presets because there's loads of them and they're great. So the patch I chose immediately was, it's here, it's under Polysynths, and it's called 1804. And that's the patch I chose. I chose that just by dicking about until I found one that I like the sound of. Right, that's the correct musical term for it. Dicking about until you find one you like, and that's it. Now, on a MIDI track here, I could add various plugins. I can add effects to this, but I didn't need to. This was the sound I wanted. It sounds like this. Right. I armed the track to record by pressing that little button. And actually what I did here was I just drew the notes on. So I would use this pencil tool here and I would literally just draw notes onto the MIDI track. It's as simple as that. You'll notice that these notes, these are the MIDI notes, these little blocks here. You'll notice they're different colors. I'll keep zooming in and out of the track using the plus and minus keys, keyboard shortcuts. That's another keyboard shortcut I know, plus and minus, just to zoom in and zoom out. These ones that are different colors, it's because they're different velocities. If I select this tool, which is the, what's it called? The internal edit mode tool, it will tell you a bit of information about each of these notes, and you'll notice that one says velocity VL116, and then that one says velocity 60. And I built a pattern of slightly different velocities. These are all at 60, and then every so often there'd be one that's a slightly higher velocity, and that gave me this effect. It gave me this rhythm. That's where I started. And I started on a C note because that little guitar line that I wrote before starts on C. So I'm in the key of C, started on a C note. Didn't do anything else to that. That runs, it starts to follow the chord pattern once there's I built it up into a chord progression. It doesn't stay on C the whole way through, but it moves through a chord progression in the key of C. But I started on a C note and I decided I'm going to build a chord. I'm going to build the C major triad. So what's next in the C major triad? I've got a C there, needed an E. So I did this. So this was my first audio track. And I used one of my Telecasters. In fact, I don't know if you can see it behind me, but it's that yellow one on the wall there. It's my Hohner Prince copy, which is a really lovely guitar. And I used that to create this sound, and I just played a soft dampened chugging E, which sound, and I panned it left. If you look at this track, you'll see I've EQ'd, compressed it, and EQ'd it again. I'll show you the settings for each one, but this is what it sounds like. It's panned left. That was the second note of the C major triad, and of course the third note is the G, which comes in here. And I built a C chord, and that's how I started it, because why not? It's in C, let's start with a C chord. Let's show you that next. So I'll show you my setup, how I found those sounds from my guitar and how I get them into Ardour, and then we'll look at what I did after they were in Ardour. Okay, so let's show you how I record guitars. These are my guitars here. There's my acoustic over there. I've got a couple of Telecasters there, a very, very nice Prince copy, an Epiphone SG, and another that's actually called a Phoenix Telecaster there. I've got a 12 string and a bass there. The amp I use is this. It's a Boss Katana 100 watt 2x10, which is an incredible amp, really, really versatile. I can use that for live gigs and home recording because of the various different power settings on it. I can actually play it quite quietly in here but still maintain the tone. I'll show you how I edit settings on this though, because it includes basically all the Boss effects that they make are all sort of pre-programmed in here, but you need a program to edit them. I use an app on my phone, which I'll show you now. Okay, so there is an application called the Boss Tone Studio or something like that, which works on Windows and Mac. They haven't made a version for Linux yet, but to be honest, because of where my computer is and where the amp is, I probably wouldn't be connecting it anyway. That's my excuse, I'm sticking to it. I use this, it's called the Katana Librarian. It's an Android app that someone's developed, which to my mind does exactly the same thing as the Boss Tone Studio. But it's easier to connect my phone to the amp. So this is the library. You can download and install presets. I've got loads in here. I tend to just fiddle about with the existing presets, or I have created some of my own tones in here as well. You can do that in the editor here, where you can sort of select all the different effects and settings and adjust them all here. This is the virtual foot controller. I have actually got the foot controller, but this is a sort of virtual version of it. So the tone I used for this first guitar, for these first distorted Telecaster tones, was this one. It's called Killer Queen or something like that. I've just found it online, downloaded it, installed it. It's meant to emulate Brian May's tone. Well, you can see for yourself if you think that actually works. So this is the setup I actually use for recording. On the center cone of the center of the left-hand cone of the Boss Katana, I've got this. It's a Neumann U87, and I use that because I've got one, and they're really expensive and great. So that is going straight from there into this, which is an Alesis mictube duo. Let's see if I can focus on that. I looked online for these recently. You can't buy them anymore at all, which is a real shame because I think this is a fantastic little thing. It's a valve preamp, and I think it sounds great. It goes straight from there into this, which is a bit of a mess and is like way past its best. A lot of the lights aren't working anymore, but it's a Behringer Tube Compressor. So it's got a limiter, it's got a compressor. You can see it. That's the input level there because it's actually picking up the U87's picking up what I'm saying. So very, very light compression on this. I'm not doing an awful lot, but that's going straight from there. So then the output of that compressor is going straight into this, which is my Behringer UMC404HD, which is about as cheaper an interface as you can buy. It's four ins, but it's only like £100, I think, to buy one of these things. Yeah, you can argue that there are probably better interfaces with lower latency, but I just don't have a problem with this. It does exactly what I want it to do, and it works brilliantly. I occasionally use all four inputs at the same time, but for guitar, so I'll have that mic input going from the amp to the preamp to the compressor over there, then into here. But what I'll also do sometimes is take a line out of the amp, so that there is a direct line out from the amp, and I'll take that straight into the interface as well, so bypassing the mic preamps and the compressor, and that just gives me two channels of the same performance essentially, but with a slightly different character, which you'll see later on. So that's how we got the guitar into our digital audio workstation, into Ardour. Here it is. That's what it looks like. I'm going to say a very quick thing, and an additional note to what I was talking about when I talked about how cheap my audio interface is. None of those guitars are particularly expensive either. And this ties into what my sort of philosophy is about home recording and home studios. You might have loads of money and you want to chuck cash at stuff, and that's fine. That's entirely up to you. I don't. Well, I've got a bit of money to spend because I've got all this kit, but I don't. There's certain things I want to spend money on and certain things I don't. I don't spend money on software because all this is open source. I do spend money on support for Ardour, so I do pay a very small subscription every month, so I've got access to all the forums, and the support is generally excellent. You get a reply pretty much instantly from the people who actually develop the program, so I feel that that's worth paying for. But you can download and use this for free because it's open source. What I think it's worth spending money on if you're going to start doing home recording and create your own home studio, the one thing I wouldn't skimp on is microphones. You'll see I mentioned there that I've got a Neumann U87 on that amp. I also use that for most of my vocal recording. It's, they're not cheap, those microphones. I managed to pick one up secondhand years and years ago and got it reasonably cheap because of a studio closing down. Expensive mics are worth it. They make a difference to your sound. A Neumann U87 will pick up things that other microphones just won't pick up. It has a flat response across a very broad frequency range. It's worth spending money on microphones. You don't need to spend a lot of money on audio interfaces. Like I say, that Behringer UMC404 thing that I use, you can pick them up for £100. They're not. It's not expensive. I've got outboard gear here. I've got those mic preamps, the valve preamps there. They're not particularly expensive. Unfortunately, you can't buy them anymore. That Behringer valve compressor there, that was like £120, I think, something like that, second hand. I think you can still buy them new, and they're probably about 200 odd quid. But we're not talking thousands of pounds spent on high-end professional equipment, but you can create really good sounds through these, so you can create a really nice signal chain, but don't skimp on microphones, because microphones are the source essentially. Once you've got past all the what guitar sounds best and what voice sounds best, the thing that matters most is the microphone that's going to be picking that performance up. So don't skimp on microphones. If you're going to spend money, spend it on microphones. Don't spend it on software. Don't spend it on interfaces. Spend it on microphones. That's my two penneth. I will stop ranting now and we'll get back on with this. Right, so I've recorded those distorted teleguitars. I mentioned that it's a sort of Brian May emulating preset that I found. Does this remind you of anything? When I was doing it, I sort of thought, this kind of sounds a little bit like the start of Now I'm Here. I don't know, does it a bit? There's a bit of it in there. I don't play with a sixpence, and I'm not a very good guitarist. So I'm never going to create Brian May's tone or replicate Brian May's tone. I'm not trying to really, but it hinted at it to me, and I like that. That's why I did it. So let's look at what processing I did within Ardour. So bear in mind that signal from the guitar, and all I've got here is the mic input. I didn't use the line out from the amp on this recording. I just used the mic input, and it was going through that compressor, but only a very, very tiny bit of compression. But you can see it's a fairly consistent signal coming in here. And I've also, I've sliced it up and I've taken the best bits and copied and pasted them, which you may think of as cheating. I don't care. I'm not a great guitarist. If I do a good bit, I'll just copy and paste it because it works. Right, but let's look at what processing I actually did on those channels. And it's basically the same for both channels, but let's have a look. So first things first, I added an EQ. And you'll see I do this on almost every track. Every track that I use that Neumann U87 on. And look what I do. This is the important bit. I'm high passing it, and I'm taking out a lot of that low end. That Neumann U87 is an incredibly sensitive mic. It does have a low cut setting on it, and I can't even remember whether I actually had it switched on. Probably not, and that's why I do it here. It will pick up all sorts of things. I live next to a busy main road. It will pick up a lorry rumbling past. It will pick up people walking past. It will pick up the wind. It'll pick up next door doing DIY. High passing, low cutting is a really important thing to do if you're using a very sensitive mic, a large diaphragm condenser. And I do that every time I use that microphone. I just take out a load of this low end stuff. In fact, if I play this now, you'll be able to see what it's actually taking out. See all this stuff. Now you're talking, I mean, this stuff right down here is really low. It's sort of like down 80 hertz and below. You almost wouldn't hear it. But the problem is, if I then go on to compress this signal, if I haven't taken out all that low-endy, rumbly stuff that you can't really hear, it's still going to get compressed. The compressor is then going to act on that, and it's going to change what the compressor is doing to the signal further down the chain. So I take out all that low-pass stuff, and it helps me create tighter bass response, more punchy bass lines later on when they come in. So I high pass everything, particularly if it's been recorded with that Neumann U87. I also did a little high shelf, just a tiny little bit of a high shelf boost here, just because I quite. One of the nice things about using that Neumann U87 is you can pick up a nice airiness, and just giving that little bit of boost, it creates a little bit of airiness to the sound. So that's what that first EQ is doing. I then compress it again. Bear in mind this is the second compression this signal has been through. Not a lot going on here though. Actually, in fact, I'm pretty sure I just left this as it was. You see, it's tiny bit of gain reduction there, just like 1 dB, and I didn't make it up. I didn't make up the gain that was lost. So 2:1 ratio. This is actually very similar to what's going on the outboard compressor. It's just helping glue everything together, just leveling off any peaks and stuff, and it's just a very slight compression, and it helps me create a nice even sound across both of these guitars because I'm using the same setting. And then I EQ'd it again, so I've gone EQ, compressor, EQ, and this EQ is acting on that compressed signal, and again I'm taking out a load of that low frequency response and just boosting around the middle here to pick out the sound that I'm looking for, that sort of high mid, low mid, high mid, middle frequency, that just giving a tiny little boost. And I didn't know to do that beforehand. I listened to it, and when I listened to it, I decided that that's what I wanted to hear. Let's solo it. Let's solo this. Of course, if I solo that, you're going to lose my voiceover, which you might be grateful of. I'm just going to loop a small section of this, and then I'll take out each one of those plugins, and we'll see what difference they're making. So let's go. I can go loop range, and that will automatically just loop that bit of the song. Then I'll solo it, and you'll lose my voiceover. In fact, if I solo my voiceover, there you go, you can hear me. So I'm going to turn off each of these plugins, and you can see what difference they've made. So that's the raw signal as it came in off the guitar. Then it added that high pass, which you won't hear a massive difference because that's sort of the point. It's taking out the stuff that you can't really hear, but that is there, and that will get treated as you do more to the signal. Compress it, and then EQ it again. So it's sort of thinning out the sound a bit, but bearing in mind that I'm about to layer it with another one, that's not a problem. Alright, let's unsolo that. So the second telly, exactly the same settings. Now, this is probably not a bad opportunity to talk about the use of buses, because I've put over those two tracks, let's show you in the mixer window, over these two tracks I've got 6 plugins there. Now what I could have done is created an audio bus, put those plugins on that audio bus and fed both of those channels through to that audio bus, and then my computer would only be processing 3 plugins rather than 6, and that's how you ease the load on your machine, on your computer, on the real-time playback of things. Why didn't I do that? Well, because I'm making this up as I go along, and I'm not brilliant at planning in advance. There's a valid point to be made here about creativity and stuff, and you know, I'm learning every time I do this, and yeah, next time I probably will just create audio buses and ease the load on my computer. But because I am making this up as I go along, I was literally writing this song as I was recording it. It's more difficult to plan ahead because this is just spontaneous decisions made at the time. So anyway, that's a note about creativity and making it up as you go along. If you want to ease the load on your PC and improve playback, use more audio buses. Don't just copy and paste plugins, which I have done a lot. Right. So what we've got so far, we've got the Surge synth and we've got these two guitars, and they end up sounding like this. Then a Surge synth comes in and does this. So that's another instance of Surge. I can't even remember where that is now. It's way down here. And it's just, so this, I actually chucked this in at a later point, but it just plays two C notes an octave apart. And it's just because, well, just thought it sounded nice. That lead sound, let me just play that for you. In fact, if we look at that, I can tell you what preset that was. It's called Ambient E-Guitar, and it's under the Plux section of the presets if you wanted to find that in future. This gets used a lot more later on, as you'll see. But there I just lobbed in a couple of notes just to pick out the two C notes. Right. Then it starts to get interesting. Then I built a chord progression. And the chord progression is very simple. It goes C, D minor, E minor, F, G. And that's what those MIDI notes are doing here. As you can see, that's just going from C, D, E, F, G. And then the guitar is following the relative notes of the chord. Can't remember what the notes are now, but you know, in the same way I built the C chord here, I've built the D minor, the E minor, the F, and the F and the G. D minor, E minor, F and G here. Just using the Surge soft synth and those distorted Telecaster guitars. So that's the basis of the track. Now that sort of this pattern runs pretty much through the entirety of the song until you get to the different section at the end. But what happens next is we do some vocals, and they sound like this.
I was living for the short term, living in the wrong world, living with all kinds of ups and downs. Couldn't seem to find the right words or accept the right terms. Couldn't find a way to find you out.
Right, so this is me singing. Using the Neumann U87, I have got a quick video to show you my setup and show you my vocal booth, because I have a vocal booth, kind of. I'll show you that now. Yes, that's right, that's my vocal booth. I hang an old duvet from the ceiling by bulldog clips and put a pillow behind it, and then I stick my Neumann U87 in there, and that's how I record all my vocals. And it works brilliantly. So that's how I do all my vocals, every single vocal track here, and you'll see there's quite a lot of them. Let me pull up the mixer window and we can show you. So we've got Voc 1, and then we've got this Voc 1 high and Voc 1 low, then we've got Voc 2 high, Voc 2 low, and then we've got vocal 3, vocal 4, vocal 4, 5. So there are a lot of vocal tracks. To be fair, there's a lot of vocals, and they're not all doing the same thing. There's harmonies, there's overlapping, you'll hear all that. But let's have a look at what's going on these vocal tracks. They're all sort of duplicated after a certain point. So this main vocal, again, first thing I do, what do I do? First thing is, because I'm recording with the Neumann U87, the first thing I've done here is high-passed everything. Okay, so that's usual. Then I've done a bit of compressor. Basically exactly the same thing I did with the guitar. And then, well, obviously slightly different EQ settings. Just, yeah, there you go, little boost at 300 hertz. Again, these aren't sort of, it's not like I know that I've got to boost my vocal at 300 hertz because that's the character of my voice. There's nothing like that. It's I listened to it and like fiddled about with it. It's like, that sounds better. I'll do that. So that's the setting. And right, again, this ties into what I was saying before about load on the computer and where I should have used buses. These are just copied for every one of these VOC 1, VOC 2, VOC 3, VOC 4, exactly the same plugins, exactly the same settings. I should have used a bus for all of these, but I didn't. Anyway, there we go. That's what we've got. That's what we've got on each of these channels. And the next thing to know about these is this. It's called an aux send, and it's going to a bus. To add one of these, you right click and you go new aux send, and it will allow you to send it to wherever you've got things to send. Let's have a look at all the effects that I've got. So I've done the EQ and the compression. I've got the tone of the voice, the dry tone of the voice the way I want it, and that's fine. In fact, let's have a listen to that voice and turn off the effects. So this is my dry vocal sound. Ooh, this is a bit scary, isn't it? Letting people hear what I actually sound like without loads of effects all over me. This is I'm going to turn off. I'll turn off everything, and then we'll turn it back on as we go. So this is my completely first vocal, absolutely dry.
I was living for the short term, living in the wrong world, living with all kinds of ups and downs.
The only other thing there, of course, is it's panned left, and that's because of the way the other vocals come in, and there's all sorts of panning going on. Let's turn on the EQ, the mono compressor, and the calf EQ. Incidentally, sorry, I should also say that the signal path for the vocal, obviously I'm using that Neumann U87, the signal path is pretty much the same as for the guitar. It's going through those Alesis mictube duo valve preamps, then it's going into the compressor. There are, different levels set on each of these things for the guitar and the vocal. The compression settings are different. The gain and the drive settings on the mic preamp are slightly different, and it's all just to do with how loud I sing and how loud the guitar is and all that kind of thing. But the signal chain is essentially the same. Preamp, compressor into Ardour. So you've just heard my dry vocal. This is what it sounds like after EQing, compression, and further EQing.
I was living for the short term, living in the wrong world, living with all kinds of ups and downs.
Then that whole signal goes out to an audio bus. And let me show you, well, let's turn it on and listen to it, and then I'll show you what it's doing. So this is with the effects on.
I was living for the short term, living in the wrong world, living with all kinds of ups and downs.
So let's have a look at that vocal bus. Let's go into the mix window, find it. There it is, VOC effects. So this is my audio bus with all my vocal effects on. So first things first, I started with the calf saturator. Most of these plugins that I'm using today, with the exception of a Reverb that's coming up, are from the Calf suite of plugins. These are all completely open source. Ardour ships with them already installed, but you can download and install them. Pretty sure they work cross-platform. I've no reason to imagine they don't. I don't use Windows or Mac, so I don't know. But this is the saturator. So this is Calf saturator. Again, I don't have a favourite setting for any of these things. I twiddle about with it until it sounds nice. So this is just giving me a little bit of saturation. After the saturator, we've got a delay, Calf vintage delay. Lots of different settings you can control here. Essentially, the timing and the nature of the delay. I'll go through and turn each of these off again because it's worth hearing what's happening. But so it's going saturator, delay. Then it's going into this Dragonfly plate reverb. So Dragonfly do a whole load of, they do hall reverbs, they do plate reverbs. In fact, let's show you all the different ones because they're great. Plugin manager, plugin selector. So these are all, most of these plugins come with Ardour. I've added a few myself, but most of them are here. I search for Dragonfly. So there they go. Early Reflections, which is just sort of one that you can play around with all the settings yourself. Hall reverb, plate reverb, room reverb. All sorts of different presets in them, or you can fiddle about with the settings yourself. So I opted for the plate reverb for this. I've tweaked the dry levels and the wet levels. I can't remember how much of this I played around with, but these are your presets here, and then you can fiddle about with the settings to your heart's content. that's what I went with, Dragonfly plate reverb. And then after that, I also stuck a chorus on it. Oh, I've forgotten I did this. So Calf has a chorus, and it's a very nice chorus effect. I think I tried that on this and couldn't get the sound I was after. There's not a lot happening here, but there is actually a chorus effect across this vocal. Those are the settings. This is one of the Steve Harris plugins. Steve Harris is a bloke who's written about 1 billion plugins. Don't know who he is, but thanks, Steve, whoever you are, because your stuff is great and I use it all the time. Those are the settings you can see. And again, this wasn't a plugin I was particularly familiar with, but I was playing around with different choruses, opened up this, fiddled about with the settings, and found a sound I was happy with. Let's go through and turn off all these. Let's keep that soloed. I'm going to loop. I'll just loop that region.
I was living for the short term, living in the wrong world, living with all kinds of ups and downs.
So let's turn each
I
of these
was
effects
living
off
for
and
the
see what it sounds
short term, living in the wrong world, living with all kinds of ups and downs. I was living for the short term, living in the wrong world, living with all kinds of ups and downs. I was living for the short term, living in the wrong world, living with all kinds of ups and downs. I was living for the short term, living in the wrong world, living with all kinds of...
So after praising Steve Harris to the high heavens there about his excellent work in open source plugin manufacture, as soon as I tried to solo that vocal effects bus and turn on the multi-voice chorus, it didn't like it at all. It just stopped playing and made a bad noise. I don't know why that is. I'll look into it, but I can play the track. It's just not allowing me to solo that vocal effects bus and turn that multi-voice chorus on and off. I don't know. Anyway, these things are sent to try us. That's what it sounds like with all the effects on.
I was living for the short term, living in the wrong world, living with all kinds of ups and downs.
So, why have I got VO1 high and VOC1 low here? So this is a technique that I use quite a lot these days, and I discovered it on Warren Hewart's channel. So if you're interested in music production, you're probably already following him, but if you're not, his channel is called Produce Like a Pro here on YouTube, and it's amazing. He does loads of fantastic stuff and talks to all sorts of producers about different techniques, and I found it extremely useful. And one of the techniques that he introduced to me on his channel was this, where you've got your core vocal track here.
I was living for the short term.
In order to fill that out, I don't know if there's a particular name for this technique either. Apologies, there might be. But what we do is we duplicate that channel. So this isn't recorded separately. This isn't another recording. This isn't just a doubling of vocals, which is incidentally a thing I do quite a lot. And you'll see that later on, just literally singing the same thing again to fill out the sound, which is a great technique. But this isn't a doubling of the vocal. This is a perfect duplication. So this section here has literally been duplicated onto these channels. But let's have a look at what's happening on these channels. Because the VOC1 high, I'm EQing it and compressing it. Quite harsh, well, very harsh EQ and quite harsh compression. But let me just show you what these EQ settings are on the VOC1 high channel. Look at that. There's almost nothing left of it. Let me just show you what that actually sounds like without the main vocal behind it. It's almost that sort of phone call effect where you've just dropped all of the middle lower end out and boosted those high frequencies. The thing is, it sounds bad. and that's deliberate. It does sound bad, but what it's doing is it's that sort of sibilancy, earwax melting frequencies, and they're isolated now, and I can mix them in to the main signal to achieve something. Let's show you what I've done with the VOC1 low, and you can probably sort of guess at this point what's happening with that. Let me close that one down. We go to VOC1 low and have a look at what the settings are for this. And lo and behold, I've just taken those very low mids, and it sounds like this.
I was living for the short term.
Sounds like I'm singing through a pillow or something. But let's look at the relative levels of these tracks now. So VOC1 high is still up fairly high, but look at the compression on these as well. So I'm going to just take that off. So 5 to 1 ratio, quite a very low threshold. So this is compressing quite a lot. In fact, if I what we're on the high channel here, let's loop this and you can see what it's doing. So it's compressing that pretty heavily. There's like up to 4 dB of, there you go, there's nearly 4 dB of gain reduction going on there. It's quite harsh compression. Similarly, let's have a look at the low and see what the compressor's doing there. Again, same sort of thing.
I was living for the short term, living in the wrong world, living with
not quite so much compression there because the level's quite low as well anyway. So they're EQ'd to make them sound bad and compressed quite heavily as well. But what you do, I'm remembering they're all at relative levels, this is how it fills out the sound. So this is my that single vocal track on its own, the original vocal recording.
I was living for the short
Let's add in
living in
those
the
other tracks.
World, living with all kinds of ups and downs. I was living for the short term, living
See
in
how
the
it fills it out.
world, living with all
And the thing
kinds
is,
of ups.
You've got more control over how much of those low and highs you put in and out of the vocal, because you're not just trying to EQ it all on one channel. You can just drop those in and out, adjust the levels accordingly, and it fills out that sound. I mean, that's pretty self-evident to my mind. I'll take them out and put them back in, and you can listen.
I was living for the short term, living in the wrong world, living with all kinds of ups and downs.
Fills it out really nicely. So that's a technique I came across not very long ago. I think I only came across that sort of maybe within the last year, through Warren Hewart's Produce Like a Pro channel, and I've been using it ever since. And I do it, and I've done it on almost every vocal track on here. I think apart from some of the harmonies, it's on every single vocal track. Try it; it's great. Works really well. So I've done that. That pretty much describes all of the vocals on this now. And this is what they sound like when you put it all together.
I was living for the short term, living in the wrong world, living with all kinds of ups and downs. Couldn't seem to find the right words or accept the right terms. Couldn't find a way.
We get harmony coming that doesn't have that on it.
You're always living in the real world, 'cause you're such a real girl, and you found a way to find me out. There wasn't much to make you feel good, not the way that he could, but you found a way to do without.
Whoa, what's that? That's amazing. So, sorry. Right, so after I've done that, after the vocals, this is when stuff starts to kick in. That initial verse, and then we get into some boom, boom, boom MIDI. Right, so what's dropping in there? Okay, I'm going to talk about the acoustic stuff first, because there is an acoustic guitar. Listen to this acoustic guitar. When it comes in with that, so remember that surge synth that just played the 2 C notes an octave apart earlier, that comes in at this point too, and it's this surge lead, and this is what these sound like together. So you can see that's the line that the surge is playing, and that's the line that the acoustic guitar is playing. They're just mirroring that chord progression. That's actually just C, D minor, E minor, F and G, and they're mirroring the whole thing. Let's talk about acoustic guitar recording though, because there's stuff going on here. Okay, so this is how I record acoustic guitar. We're going to ignore the fact that neither of these mics are plugged in, just suspend disbelief for a moment. But these are a matched pair of Rode NT5s. So these are small diaphragm condenser microphones, so very sensitive but a more sort of accurate directional microphone. What I do with them, and this is exactly how I recorded what you've heard there, is very close mic'd, and I point one mic at the neck here, usually about the sort of like 12th, 14th fret, and I point one at the sort of bridge around here. And then I pan them left and right, but I'll show you that once we're into Ardour. But that's how you were getting that, and that's not pitch shifted or anything. That guitar that you were hearing, it's literally just me playing up here like, and then I play that C, D minor, E minor, F, G, just those little arpeggios like that. But that's all it is. And then these Rode NT5s are going again into the Alesis mictube preamps, into the compressor. The compressor is a dual channel compressor, so I can take two outputs out of that into the two inputs of that, and then the two outputs out of the compressor into the Behringer UMC404HD. And bingo, you've got two preamped compressed inputs going into Ardour. Okay, so that's how we get that acoustic guitar sound into Ardour. Let's have a look at what I've actually done to it then though. So I've put that multi-chorus on it again. Is it going to break everything if I try and solo it? This is what it sounds like with that surge lead. So this is what the whole concept sounds like. So let's have a look at what I've done to this acoustic guitar. So the neck is panned left, the bridge is panned right. It's a cliche that within the music production community, and some people don't like it, panning a guitar neck left and a bridge right. I do like it, so up your bum. Here's what I've done though with each of those channels. So guess what I did first? Yes, that's right, I high passed everything, and I've put a fairly considerable high shelf on that as well. For obvious reasons, it's playing the part of a high-pitched instrument. It's a high-pitched arpeggio line, and so it's that airiness, that lightness that I want, so I've high shelved it at that point and low passed it, because although they're very directional, those NT5s, they're sensitive condenser mics, they will pick up a lot of low end, so took all that out of there. Then I've done a bit of compression, again very light. So when I say I've left this as it is, this is when you first open up the calf compressor. These are the settings that are already there. I haven't touched the attack or release, haven't touched the knee. I don't think I touched anything, literally just left it as it is. Ratio of 2:1, threshold at -18. It's doing a very, very light bit of compression. The only other thing I've done is I've made up I've used the makeup gain to make up the fact that it is reducing the signal by about 1 dB. So I'm making up that here. And yep, so that's the EQ, and then I've done again so EQ, compression, EQ. Let's have a look what I did in the second EQ. Again, really subtle, isn't it? Look at that. So it's again just a little bit of high shelf. I obviously felt the need to bring that those high frequencies up slightly more. Now let's have a look at. Now this is the calf multi-chorus, so I'm hoping that I can take all of these effects out, and you'll be able to hear what they're doing. So I'm going to turn them all off and hope that it doesn't have a Barney. It doesn't. Look, it's fine. This is what it sounds like. That. So this is the neck mic, completely dry. Low pass it. High pass it, low cut it. And there's that high shelf that's kicking in there as well. Bring it back a bit. Compression. You're not really going to hear that, it's too subtle. A bit more EQ, that high shelf. So now, to me, this almost sounds like a harp, and that was kind of the point. I just really liked the way this ended up sounding. And let's hear what that chorus is doing, if anything. It's really subtle, that, but it is doing something, and once you put them together, you can start to hear the chorus a little bit now that the two of them together. But I just love the way it sounds like a harp. It's lovely. So that's there, and again, yeah, in conjunction with that surge lead, and you get this sound. So that was that section, that repeats at various points throughout the song, that little acoustic line from the guitar and the surge lead that's sort of playing a slight harmony. It's not mirroring it exactly. Let's have a look at, there's something else quite significant that happens at this point in the song. Let's have a listen.
Way that he could, but you found a way to do without.
The thump, the kick. How have I made that? I've made it using this. It's called Geonkick. Again, open source plugin. This is a synthesizer. I'm going to show you what this looks like. This is Geonkick. I've got oscillator 1 and oscillator 2 doing very similar things. There's oscillator 1, there's oscillator 2. You twiddle these envelopes and fiddle about with the pitch and stuff to create this sound. I've just played about with this. So I mentioned Unfa earlier. Unfa does an entire video about how to synthesize. I think he almost does an entire kit. He does like hi-hats and snares and all sorts. I just wanted a kick. I'm not experienced or proficient enough in this yet to start making entire drum kits, nor do I really want to. I'm not a massive fan of synthesized drum sounds, but I think for the purposes of this, what I wanted was a big thumpy dancey kick, and this has just worked brilliantly for this. So I twiddled about with the oscillators, just turned on 2 oscillators, you know, created a wave function whereby the all the impact and the kick and that attack is right at the beginning, and just fiddled about with it until there you can see more clearly the actual envelope. So that's oscillator 1, that's oscillator 2. Yeah, and then you fiddle about with the frequencies until you get that sound you created. So I messed about with this until I came up with this sound, and that's what I've used as that sort of dance kick on this. If you want to know more about Geonkick, just go and watch Unfa's video, because he knows far more about it than I do. And there's loads that you can do with this. I've done the absolute basics here in terms of just the way I've used it is really, really basic. But I think to good effect. Personally, it's a great sound. I love the sound of this kick.
Way that he could, but you found a way to do without.
There is something else happening here though, and it involves another bus and sidechain compression. So let's have a look at that. We'll go to the mix window. So I created this bus, and all this bus has got on it is a calf sidechain compressor. So I'm going to try and explain sidechain compression. Sidechain compressor, so it's a compressor and works in exactly the same way as a normal compressor. You set your ratio, you set your threshold. The attack and release times become a lot more critical when you're doing sidechain compression, because it's only triggering, it's being triggered, the actual activity of it is being triggered by a thing that you specify. What I'm doing here is I am using that Geonkick, that thumpy dance kick, to trigger this compressor, and then what I've done is I got a whole series of channels going into this bus. Let's go back to the mixer and we'll be able to see what exactly is going through this sidechain compressor. These channels are, you can see they're going to rhythm sidechain down here, but I want to get to them later because they don't come in until much later in the song. But look, those distorted telly guitars, you know, the chugging guitars, and that surge synth that's creating that chord progression. Those very first 3 tracks we set up, those 3 tracks we set up are being routed completely straight through to that sidechain compressor bus. So they're not going to the master output. You can choose here where you want to send things to. They are going to the rhythm sidechain. So they're not going to the master output. They're going to this, and then from there, this sidechain bus is from there going to the master. So everything is going through to this sidechain bus, and what's happening when it gets to this sidechain bus is it's being compressed, because there's a compressor on there, but it's only being compressed when that kick hits. The reason for that, and hopefully you can hear it actually when it kicks in. So listen to those. Pay attention to you know, that surge synth and those guitars. Well, let's remind you of what they sound like without all the vocals over the top of it. So this is what it sounds like as all that kicks in. So it's just that. It's just those 3 tracks, this surge track and these telly distortion 1 and 2. And they're going through to that. As soon as this Geonkick kicks in, which is here, listen to what happens to them.
And a way to do without.
Can you hear that sort of pulsating? They almost become more rhythmic, and the reason for that is every time that kick hits, they're being compressed. They're not being compressed at any other point up until when that kick hits, and when that kick hits, they're just being pulled down ever so slightly, not by a massive amount. But the reason you do that, and I've put a lot of the other rhythm stuff later in the song through the same bus, the reason you do that is because particularly for that rhythm stuff and particularly for that surge synth, that's quite low pitched. If I just left that as it was and didn't route it through that sidechain compressor, it's sharing a lot of the same frequencies as that kick drum. Those telly distorted guitars and that surge soft synth, they're quite low frequencies. They're going to be sharing some of the same frequencies as that Geonkick. Low frequencies are literally long waveforms. It can get really muddy really quickly down at that bottom end of your mix, which is again one of the reasons why I high pass everything and take out as much of that low stuff from the other instruments as possible. But they're supposed to be occupying that space. But what sidechain compressing that rhythm with the Geonkick is it allows that kick drum to come through more prominently. The level of that is not changing at any point, but what it means is the relative levels, those rhythm instruments, those guitars and that surge synth are just pulling down ever so quickly every time that kick hits, which is why you get that sort of pulsating effect, and it emphasizes that kick drum. The kick drum isn't just louder, it's relatively louder, and it allows that kick drum to be more prominent and play its part more fully, and its part is to go dum, dum, dum.
And a way to do without.
So I haven't sidechained the acoustic guitar or that other surge synth that's doing that high pitched lead, because I don't need them to move out of the way of the kick drum, because they are occupying a completely different part of the frequency spectrum. But that surge synth that's doing that pulsating thing right from the beginning, and those guitars are quite low frequency. If I didn't sidechain compress them, they would just be sort of overlapping each other, and that kick would not be as prominent. I'm not going to start rerouting everything now to prove my point, just take my word for it. Most dance songs do this. It's a really, really common thing. You know, that's where you'll hear on most EDM tracks will sort of do this, that sidechain compressions where everything else is pulled down at the point of the kick, and you get that sort of pulsating thing that is very, very common to EDM and dance music.
Without
So the observant amongst you will notice that that lead guitar that comes in there is that acoustic line that I told you about earlier, that I demonstrated for you on the acoustic guitar. That was the whole basis for this song, is just that little acoustic line. It ended up becoming this lead guitar line. There's not a lot more to say about that, actually. The only thing that's worth saying is I sort of like played around with some fuzz settings, which come back towards the end of the song. The only other thing that I did on that, and I did this within the Katana Librarian on the actual amp itself, is I added an octave pedal, so you can hear that as effectively two octaves of this line playing. But let's have a quick look, because this is the first example of what I mentioned earlier when I was talking about recording the electric guitar. I've got guitar lead mic and guitar lead DI. So that's, if you remember, I talked about having the mic on the amp, which is exactly how I recorded this. So I had the U87 on the mic, as I've already demonstrated, but I also took that line out of the back of the amp and straight into the interface. So that's not going through the compressor or the preamps. It's just the sort of clean signal effectively from the amp. It has the effects that are applied by the amp, but it doesn't have any of the character of the microphone or the preamps or the compressor, and it does sound different. Have a listen. Let's just listen to. So this is the mic. So this is not dissimilar to the sounds from those tellies, except a different setting within the amp. And there's a delay on there as well. I'll talk through what I've done on each channel. But that's the mic. This is the DI, effectively, the line out from the amp. They sound very different. And what's odd about it is, now there are different things on these channels. So on the mic, you'll see I've EQ'd it, which again will just be, there's a little bit more going on, but effectively there's a high pass there going on, and then I've boosted quite a bit higher frequencies, but then I've put a delay on, and that delay is quite prominent there. But on the DI, what I've done is I've EQ'd, which will be to high pass and also low pass. So I took out some of the high end, because I've boosted the high end on the mic'd guitar. I've taken it out on the DI guitar, which gives it that sort of softer sound. Boosted it a little bit here because it sounded nice. And then the only other thing I've done here is I've put a hall reverb on it. So I talked about the Dragonfly plugins earlier. So this is a hall reverb, and I've put a big hall reverb on this. So again, let's listen to those. Let's listen to each of those. So this is the DI. This is the mic. got a delay on it, so it goes on for days. In your own time. Right, but let's listen to the both of them together. Now let's listen to the whole thing as those guitars kick in.
And if this is what...
More vocals come in. Already talked through exactly what I've done with the vocals. Sorry for this squeaky chair. I keep trying to oil this chair to stop it squeaking like that, and I can't find where it's squeaking from. It's really annoying. Apologies. I've got a 12 string. There is a 12 string hanging up on the wall over there, and it features in this song, and it sounds like this. It's quite low down in the mix. I just wanted something sort of lush and high-end, high-frequency, sort of washing about in the background. It sounds like this.
If this is what you paid for, can you get your money?
Now what you can hear fairly prominently on this is that chorus, which I've used again. It's quite, oh no, sorry, I apologise, it's not the chorus. I ended up using a phaser in the end. So there's quite a lot going on with this 12 string. Again, 12 string neck and bridge, I recorded it in exactly the same way as my acoustic guitar that I've just showed you. Then there's quite a lot of stuff chucked at this. So I've EQ'd it, which will be, for the sake of argument, let's have a look at that. Yeah, as you can see, high passing it again. Compression, EQ, compression, EQ, you'll be familiar with that now. I do it on pretty much everything. Then I've done this phaser, which looks like this, which is quite cool. And again, this is just about playing about. I'd never used this plugin at all before this, but I wanted that sort of washy, sort of weird 12. I wanted the 12 string to just be a sort of washy, weird effect going on in the background. It's not prominent, but it's there. So on their own, they sound like this. Which is, I mean, I like it. I don't use my 12 string very much, but it felt right here. And it gives this sort of wash effect in the background.
If this is what you paid for, can you get your money back? This short-term, long investment won't return the things you lack.
We've covered almost everything except that it all changes at the end. The vocals start to overlap and do this, and then something weird happens and something great happens.
I was living for the short term, living in the wrong world, living with all kinds of ups and downs. Come back tomorrow, beg, steal, and borrow. And if this is what you paid for, can you get your money back? Come back tomorrow.
Right, so at this point, particularly at this bit where all the instrumentation drops out and it goes a cappella very briefly, I wanted an EQ sweep, an EQ sweep effect, which is, you know, if you see DJs messing about in clubs and they go whoosh, whoosh, and they you know, drop out all the top end and raise the mids and then sweep it back again, and that sort of thing. So I wanted to do that, and the way I've done it is only on this vocal, on vocal 5, because I've got lots of vocals on here, which is this one.
Come back tomorrow.
On that tomorrow, so I've literally just cut out that little bit where it says Moru and just repeated it. You can see it all repeated here. And then what I've done is I've added this 3-band EQ, which is really, really simple, but it had to be because what I wanted to do was automate, that EQ sweep, whereby I take out a load of the high band, and you can see here, so actually this is mid band, so this is mid band coming out. Let me make these a bit bigger so you can see more clearly what's happening. So this is the automation for that EQ, and each one of these is so this is on the mid band and this is on the high band. This is why I wanted to use a 3-band EQ, because actually trying to automate, trying to automate this sort of thing on a 12-band EQ is going to be too complicated. So I wanted to keep it simple. I didn't want to be messing about with this for ages. I just wanted this effect to happen. So I've got the mid-band EQ just as normal all the way through here, and then suddenly at this point it starts to drop down. And so does the high EQ, but then at a certain point the high EQ drops down and then shoots back up. And then this happens.
It fears you follow if you get your money back. Come back tomorrow.
What happened there? Good Lord, that sounded amazing, Bransby. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed making this song. It's great. So, what did happen there? Well, Drumgizmo came in. What is Drumgizmo? Drumgizmo is a drum sampler. Let me show you the actual interface for Drumgizmo. I love this. I've used it on a few tracks now. It's just terrific. Now, I know there are all sorts of commercial applications on the market that do exactly what Drumgizmo do, and quite frankly they may well do it better, and they may have a bigger range of drum kits, and they're all played by, I don't know, Dave Grohl and Phil Collins or something like that, but I don't care. These guys have put this together and I think it's ace. So this is what it looks like. It's not going to win any awards for interface, but they've just sampled two or three. They've sampled 3 drum kits. I'm going to bring up the website. This is the Drumgizmo website, drumgizmo.org. Let's have a look at their drum kits. So these are the drum kits. So you've got Cross-L kit. This should be considered a metal or rock kit. It's raw. I suspect these lads are Scandinavian. They just look like they're probably Scandinavian. I'm not sure. DSR kit, Muljord kit, and the Arsi Monster. And the shitty kit. That's rude, lads. And then they've done this one where they've just banged things outside. I've never used that one, but I've used most of these at some point for various reasons, and they've just put loads of mics on these drum kits and recorded a really extensive sample library of each one of these things. The website will show you exactly what the microphone setup was, what channels, what mics were on what channel for the MIDI map. You load up the drum kit and you load up the MIDI map of your choice. There are various things here which allow you to voice limit. I've never really looked at that. The bleed control I use quite a bit because that allows basically it's the bleed between the mics on the drum kit, and if you want tighter control over things you lower the bleed, which I did in this case a fair bit. And then it's got a velocity humanizer and a timing humanizer. I've never experimented enough to see how much that's impacted by you manually setting the velocities for notes, so I haven't really investigated that much. My main concern about this, or my main interest in this, is I think the samples themselves are fantastic. The drum kits sound great, and the way you configure this in Ardour, when you add this as an instrument, so you would go to the add a MIDI track dialog as I showed you earlier. You would select Drumgizmo. When you select Drumgizmo, I'm not going to do that now because it's already there, it gives you the option, and it does this for all multi-channel MIDI instruments, it gives you the option to fan out the MIDI track. So this is the sort of control track here, this Drumgizmo. It's probably easy to show you this in the mix window. So this is the sort of control track, the sort of master track for the whole instrument, and you'll see I've got a compressor and a reverb on there, but it fans it out, and it fans it out to all the outputs that it has for this plugin. And you can configure it and mix it in the same way you would actually configure you would actually mix and control a recorded drum kit. So the website shows you what the mapping is for each of these kits. It'll show you the channel setup, and then you can just replicate that in Ardour, which I have done here. So I've got overhead left, overhead right, snare top, snare bottom, snare trigger, kick right, kick left, hi-hat, ride, tom. So all these, you just label them up as you would label if you were recording a drum kit, multi-tracking a drum kit. And then you just mix it and control it in the same way that you would a drum kit. So for example, my overhead left and overhead right are panned left and right. I've got an ambient left and right that are panned left and right. And then you can add, I've EQ'd the snare, I've EQ'd the kick and the hi-hat, and then on the master track I've added a compressor and a reverb. And let's solo it so you can just hear. So I'll solo Drumgizmo so you can just hear what this sounds like. I just bloody love this, it's great. Now you'll notice there was a kick drum on those first beats. I didn't use the kick drum for the rest of it because I'm still using Geonkick. So altogether this sounds like this. Now, I have friends who play finger drums amazingly. So when you've got a drum kit set up on a MIDI channel like this, they can play the notes on a keyboard and play it as if they're playing a real drum kit, and it's amazing. And I know Unfa's really good at sequencing drums and drawing on the MIDI notes to follow particular patterns. I'm not particularly great at this, so I do quite basic drum patterns, but just make it work for the song, and in my opinion this works for the song. So I'm gonna take everything off solo and just listen to what happens here. Right, so what's happened here? I've put in that drum track, so we've suddenly got that sort of more open feeling of live drums. They're not really live. It's all MIDI sequence, but it sounds quite realistic. I think it sounds great. The chord sequence has changed. The Telecasters with that Queen sort of effect on that Brian May emulation thing, they've all gone away. That surge lead, these sounds, all that's gone away. And this chord sequence has changed slightly. If I remember rightly, it now goes, rather than C, D minor, E minor, F, G, I think now it goes to C, E minor, A minor, F, G. So it changes slightly. The chord pattern changes ever so slightly. And I've recorded a whole bunch of extra guitar and bass. So the guitars just recorded in the same way. They sound like this. Let me show you. It sounds like a mess, doesn't it? Well, it's not. It's supposed to be dirty and fuzzy. I use my SG quite deliberately for that. I've got the heavy fuzz setting on on the Boss Katana there, and then I use the SG because the higher output on the humbuckers just creates that really dirty fuzzy sound. And you'll notice that's pulsing, and it's pulsing because again that sidechain compression is there though, so they're routing through to that sidechain compression bus. Let's show you how I record bass, because I've got two bass tracks here. You'll see bass mic and bass DI. I'm going to show you how I do that. Okay, let's talk about how I do bass, because this is going to seem a little complicated if I'm honest. Think about it this way. I'm trying to get a clean DI sound and a mic'd amp sound. I want to play the bass line once but have two channels of it. One from the mic on the amp and one straight from the guitar. So this is what I do. That's my amp, that's my bass guitar there. So the bass guitar goes into this, which is just a straightforward DI box. So that's going straight into the input on this DI box, okay? Now that is then being linked via the link function here, and that is going via jack cable over to here. And that is going into this, which is, this is a little Valeton bass amp head. Right, I'm going to talk very briefly about this because it is a bit weird. This amp here is a Trans Am Reverb Rocket. I inherited this and had some problems with the electronics on it, where I had two options. It was either too quiet to hear or face-meltingly loud. I messed about with the electronics and broke them completely because I'm not an electrician or an electric engineer, and I didn't really know what I was doing. But what I did manage to do afterwards was I thought, well, hang on, I've got this amp that doesn't work, but it's got a 12-inch cone on it. It's got a really big cone. So I just bypassed the amp completely, put an input jack on the headphone socket there, and now this is a amp head. So this would usually be plugged into here. So I take the output out of this little tiny bass amp head, goes into there, and lo and behold, I've got a really nice tasty bass amp. Right, so that's how the signal gets from the bass via the DI into there. I then got a mic on here. Now I'm using this SE4400. You can see that. SE4400A. I use that on the bass because I find that that microphone gives a good bass response. It gives a nice fat bass response. So I point it right at the middle of the cone there. So this all seems unnecessarily complicated, doesn't it? But basically it's going to this DI box. So everything's coming to this DI box here. And that output is going straight into the Behringer UMC404. So straight from the DI box into there. That is my direct in. So that is just the clean signal from the guitar, from the bass guitar. The mic'd signal is then going from the microphone there, from the amp, into a different input. So that is then going through the usual signal chain of the mic preamp into the compressor into there. So I've got two inputs from the same performance. Again, like the electric guitar, I've got a mic'd amp and I've got a DI. That's how I record bass guitar. Okay, so that's how I record the bass, and this is what it sounds like when it gets in here. So this is the bass soloed, well, both bass tracks, the mic and the DI. Again, quite messy, quite sort of distortion-y and filthy, but that's kind of the point. It matches with that heavily fuzzed SG. But let's see what I've done here on each of these. So on the bass mic, I've just EQ'd it. It's already quite heavily compressed. I compressed it quite heavily on the valve compressor here. Now, weirdly, I have again high passed this, done a low cut, and actually taken off some of the bass frequencies, which is odd because it's a bass, and then I've boosted at 1 kilohertz, but that's because I liked that sound. So let's listen to that just soloed. Take the EQ off. See how it gets very muddy when you do that. And that throbbing, that pulsating, is because it's being sidechain compressed. In fact, that's another reason why I didn't do any compression here, because I knew it was going to get compressed by the sidechain compressor as well. Let's have a listen to the DI, see what that sounds like. See what I did on the Let's see what I did on the EQ here. Probably the same sort of thing. Or we've taken off a lot of the high end of that. Let's bypass that and see what that sounds like. Let's just bring it back here. So you're taking out a bit of that throatiness, but put them together. And then with the distortion guitar. Okay, so that's that sort of rhythm section for this last phase of the song. Let me unsolo this so we can remember how all this sort of kicks in. So it kicks in with that vocal fading out, and then of course so the other thing to note, of course, is there is another surge synth on this. And here it is, and here's the patch. If you're interested, it's called Spaceship, and it's created by Damon Armani. So Damon Armani, thanks very much for, in your pad section, creating the Spaceship pad, because I think it sounds ace. I wanted a sort of shimmery, big, bright sound to sort of contrast against that sort of muddy, filthy, distorted guitar and bass, and in my opinion, it works well.
It's so good to have you back. These dreams were made forever, so they have to stay intact. For all that when
big old layered vocals there to finish things off, but there is one final little coup de grace, one final little extra bit to finish things off. So as we get to the end of these layered vocals,
before you picked him up,
lead guitar comes back in. It sounds different though, you'll note from the previous lead guitar. That's because I took off the octave pedal and used a different guitar. So I moved on to my grey Phoenix Telecaster that you saw on the wall there earlier. Just has a slightly different tone. There's a reason for having loads of guitars. It's not just for fun. They all do have slightly different characteristics. If I remember rightly, I'm pretty sure I just used the bridge pickup on that, going through that fuzz but without the octave pedal on, and that's the tone I came out with, which I absolutely love. I think it sounds terrific. That's it. That's the end of the song. There's one more thing I nearly forgot, the VCA, because I've described everything else, but then I nearly forgot, because it's tucked away here all the way at the bottom, the VCA. I mentioned this briefly at the start, and this exists purely for this moment. It's quite a lot of effort to go to, really. You see that little blip there? There's a level drop by 1 dB, right? But the reason I've done that with the VCA is because it's automated. So at a certain point in the song, this VCA drops level by 1 dB. We'll play the track and you can see and you can listen to what happens at that exact point.
And when it comes together, it's so good to have you back.
It's just for those vocals. It's called VCA1 vocals. But let's have a look. It's we can see up here. This is the sort of, it's not a problem, but this is what I was sort of dealing with the VCA, is all of these vocals come in. There's loads of them. How many tracks have you got here coming in? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I don't know. It's like 11, 12 vocal tracks all coming in at the same time for these big layered vocals at the end. And it was too loud. It was too much in the mix. It was just, yeah, it was not very much. I've only dropped it by a decibel, but because I wanted to bring all of them down at the same time by a dB, I could go through and automate each individual track, but that's just tedious. You know, why would anybody do that? So what I do is, if I show you in the mixer, you can see all of these vocal tracks, everything that's got vocal on it, you'll see has this. You see where this says 1? This is because they're going to VCA 1. Nothing else is affected by that because I'm not doing anything else with that VCA. You don't add plugins to them or anything like that. And there may be other uses for them. I'm not sure. What I use them for is automating large groups of tracks. So I've put all of the vocals, which you can see everything that's got this 1 on it, everything with a 1 on it is going through to this VCA, and I can automate that VCA, and that's what I'm doing. So as these vocals hit, all of the vocals are just being pulled down 1 dB so that they weren't too loud. So from that original idea, which was a really, really simple C major scale melody line that I came up with on my acoustic guitar, I've turned that into 5 minutes and 5 seconds of what I find to be enjoyable music. And that's it. That's what it's like to work in Ardour. That's what it's like to work with open source software and plugins. It might be that you're looking at this and thinking, well, what's the point of using open source? I can do all that in Logic. I can do all that in Pro Tools. And yeah, of course you can. You can do it in Cube. I used Cubase for years. I used Pro Tools when I was at uni. I used Logic at one point a long time ago. I use this now. I think people get a bit too worked up about, you know, which DAWs are better. They all do the same thing. Let's be honest. They all basically do the same thing. And if you get used to using one of them and you're happy using one of them, then just stick with it. It just so happens that I've decided to see what's possible with open source software, and I haven't come across anything that's not possible yet. I'm doing everything I want to do. All these videos are made with open source software. I use Kdenlive for editing. All my graphics are created using GIMP. I just use open source software because why not? It all works, and I don't have to pay loads of money to the likes of Apple and Microsoft, so that makes me happy. That's it. That's the song. That's what it's like to work in Ardour and use all these different instruments and run things on Linux. I hope you enjoyed this. If there's any questions you have, anything you'd like me to look at in more detail, anything you'd like me to learn properly, don't do that, then let me know. And I will do what I can for you in future, and I'll keep making these videos if you keep responding and enjoying them. All right, thanks very much. Take care. Bye-bye.